So pleased to be joined today by Vik Dalishus. Vik, how are you doing today? Welcome to Under the Ring Pro Wrestling Conversations.
Philip, thank you for having me. It is absolutely positively your pleasure. How's it spelled on there?
It's spelled correctly because it's a mobile order. Yeah.
Fyll. Yeah,
Nice.
Phil and I always have this joke back and forth that we have our names misspelled quite often, and I think it's hilarious that they misspell Phil. I don't know how that gets done. And delicious is, for me, misspelled all the time. So
yeah,
we have that in common. I find it to be
it's your last name. What can you do about it?
What can I do?
So really, for the listeners, this episode was sort of born out of Vik and I just talking about the wrestling world one day, back and forth, and me realizing, this would be a really good podcast, and Vik is really good on podcasts. So, we wanted to, for full disclosure, we're recording this on December 8th. This is coming out on January 1st. This is going to be kind of our New Year's content, but we're going to kind of look back at the year that was 2023 in pro wrestling and the year ahead, 2024 in pro wrestling. So
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, even though, it's still in reality not New Year yet, but it is by the time this will be out there in the world. But what wrestling did you find yourself enjoying the most in 2023?
Man, in preparation for the show, I kind of was going back and thinking all about this past year, and it really feels like 5 different years all in one. Wrestling has this way of always moving like this. And sometimes the waves are further apart and sometimes they're really close together. And 2023 to me was one of those years where it was really close together, where we would have the business at the highest of highs, and then all of a sudden there's a low, and then boom, right back up high with something. And it was that crazy news cycle, really. And as far as athleticism goes, I don't feel that we've ever seen a year like we've had in 2023. And the wrestling business constantly continues to evolve. And athletically, we're at the peak of where professional wrestling has ever been. Storytelling has been some of the best on television that we've had in the last few years between all of the major companies. I don't want to just limit it to two. So it's been a crazy year. And for me personally, I've been kind of in the mix with some of these guys and just heard some of the stories and been in different situations, and just kind of had my finger on the pulse of what's been going on, and as much as you really can from the outside. And it's a crazy year. The professional wrestling is at times a very easy thing for people to talk about because it's a super water cooler-esque. Well, did you see what happened? Did you see who came back? Did you see the story? Like, WWE is really big with adding social media and YouTube personalities to their programming. So it's all of the different genres and generations all having something to talk about all at the same time. You got Bad Bunny and Logan Paul, and it's really combining all of the worlds into one. And there's room for every kind of professional wrestling because there's a version of it out there, and likely it's on television. We're at a point right now in the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, where you could watch a new professional wrestling show almost every day of the week. That's unheard of. That's crazy.
People don't realize, like, when we were younger, we would have to wait for basically the hour of wrestling that was available to us on Saturday if we wanted to watch the WWF.
Yes.
Maybe 2 hours on Saturday night at 6:05 if we really wanted to get ambitious and watch the Superstation. But there really wasn't, it's the push of a finger now, and you're just going to get what you want. The interesting thing with WWE for me in the year that they had is what I really liked about them, and it's different than their social media stuff and different than their use of attractions and stuff like that. It's been the long term stories. I've never seen a story that WWE has produced last as long or be as effective, even from a business perspective, as the Bloodline.
Yeah,
I don't think I can remember a story like this during my fandom. What have you thought of it?
I agree. When you thought it was at kind of its peak, it continued in a way that was still very interesting. So um, it's kind of like you get a sequel to a movie without the movie being turned off. Every time that the storylines seem to peak, but then have continuity into the next. And the way that all of the characters, if we're going to talk about it from a story point of perspective, the way all the characters have interacted with each other and everybody has had some kind of a history with everybody else that they are doing a wonderful job at doing callbacks on. So, I mean, even the Sami Zayn stuff is what I was very drawn into, that development of where that was going to go, and then finally last year with the turn, and then leading all the way up to Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, and then the Uso turn and the story that that's led to, and now you add in Randy Orton to the mix, and there's a lot that can happen there, and the Royal Rumble is going to dictate a lot of where the future stories go, but everybody kind of has a little bit to do with everybody else, and having those interactions and having that stuff replayed through their videos each week on television and keeping you reminded that everybody's got kind of something going on with everybody else has really made it great television, and they haven't abandoned it, which is
Yeah.
also really important. They stuck to it. They, declaring that Roman Reigns is one of the longest reigning heavyweight champions of all time, and that whole feud, like, it's just something that they didn't really necessarily do in the 2000s.
Makes it feel more special too. And it's interesting now as they've rolled out some other long term stories. They've got what they have going on with the Judgment Day. They've got what they have going on with Damage Control. And even if you go down to NXT, the stuff with Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams has been playing out for months on end, which will probably culminate somewhere too. So do you think that first of all, for the Judgment Day, what's interesting to me is that has lapped through multiple changes in creative and stayed consistent, probably mainly due to Paul Heyman and some other people pushing the right buttons there. But do you see the Levesque takeover of the creative process as being a positive in WWE?
I feel that we can't look at it any other way other than it being a positive because of how interesting the television show is and how it's moldable. So when there's something that comes up that's something for them that's hot for them to run with, they're able to stick it into the program and make it still work. And the CM Punk stuff would be a great example. A couple of weeks ago they had no idea what they were going to do, and all of a sudden he's already in segments and got the merchandise and the plans are rolling, and they're going to rock and roll with that. And if somebody catches that's hot in NXT and they're ready to bring them up, or like they just run with that stuff, and it's great. I think the NXT guys being able to have the long-term stories where the problem, no, it's never a problem, but one of the things that's been a deterrent for the developmental program was people being pulled out of the system too early, and being pulled out of that system without having the opportunity to really sink their teeth into the meat and potatoes of what professional wrestling is when you have a chance to tell your stories. and tell them long term and develop the nuances with your body language and what works and what doesn't in front of what crowds and all of those things. And it didn't always necessarily talent didn't get that time in developmental to have those opportunities. And there are a lot of times getting those very first storylines and angles and stuff on the main roster for millions of people to see. You know, we're getting the Carmelo Hayes run through that. The Braun Breaker stories were great. And, he's getting a chance to be really seasoned and really developed before he gets brought up to the main roster. And he's just one example, I feel, of a guy who's really benefiting from that system.
Yeah.
Personally, I've had a chance to watch him grow his whole career. So it's great to see him making the most of all of the opportunity that he's got and the place that he's at and learning and constantly, like, there's not a time that I watch that guy where he's not getting better, just incrementally better every time. So, they're not getting plucked out of there. There's a couple guys where they've been brought up and then they get brought back down. And I think that's just previous generations that was looked at as like, oh, maybe you went up and you failed.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think it's just to give you that taste, to give you an idea of what that system is. So that way, when you go back to your training and you go back to the performance center, you have new motivation and new things to work on and new direction for where you want to hone and perfect what they're looking for. And that's also a thing that the other major company doesn't have right now.
Yeah. And one thing for people listening who might be wondering, Vik Dalishus actually has experience of being very much around the WWE developmental system, having previously wrestled in Ohio Valley Wrestling in the aughts, I guess we call it now, or the 2000s, exactly
early 2000s.
Early 2000s. So you definitely. What's wild for me about the current iteration of developmental is it's happening on USA Network and like Peacock and Hulu. Like, so people are actually getting to watch match 1, match 2, match 3 of like talents, but at the same time, it's generating a grassroots movement towards the people that they like, and then a desire to see the people that they like on bigger stages. So while it's, I don't think any wrestler really wants match 1 searchable. But to use an AEW example, back when we had the Guns on this show, Colton Gunn mentioned like, yep, my first match, it's on YouTube. It was in Daly's Place. It was on Dark. You could go find it. That's just wild that we're getting to see literally like ground zero of development.
I think there's a change in philosophy there too, obviously, and it probably has something to do with how the people that are in charge of that system have looked at it. But previously it was they wanted to hide you in developmental. So you had a chance to do that stuff and work television in Kentucky or Florida. And the only people that saw you were the people in Kentucky or in Florida. And they prefer that it wasn't shared out there. And they preferred that there wasn't a tremendous amount of the tapes being put out or stuff put on YouTube. And they would go after that stuff vigorously at one point here before there was a flip in their philosophy. There was a time where guys would have whole careers in developmental and then they'd be brought up to the main roster and their name would be changed and they were a whole different person than they were. And that used to create quite the issue when they tried to go back to developmental like weekend or finish up their storylines, because now they're two different characters in the same realm, in the same universe. And it was, weird. Having people follow you your whole career is, at this point, is very the real world kind of thing, where Truman Show-esque, where people are being able to feel like they're a part of this person's journey the whole time. That's why vlogs work so well. And, it's a lot of times they want to cheer for we always want to cheer for the underdog, and watching somebody sleep in their car and eat gas station food while they're following their dreams is inspirational for people who, have lived that or get that or want or tried that themselves and didn't make it, or something couldn't do it for one or another reason, and it makes for um, a whole different kind of audience than just a professional wrestling audience too.
Yeah, connecting on a more organic level there. Is there anybody who stands out to you as somebody you think is going to break out in WWE in 2024 that you've noticed?
I feel the stage is very much set for Damian Priest to break out in 2024. That Money
Isn't
in the
that
Bank.
wild too that here in 2023 we're talking about a 40-year-old guy that
Yeah.
went through the developmental,
Yep.
and and he's not the only one.
No.
This is a very different
No.
wrestling business that we've had.
Yeah. But they've invested in the character, and it's at the point now where he's had as much television exposure as if you were to take a younger person and put them on TV for 2 or 3 years, and he doesn't show any signs that he's this aging, broken down mule. That's for
No,
sure. Um, the the character is getting over. At times the reason the Judgment Day I feel has done so well is they've been able to shift that story between who the leader is and letting it organically develop. Edge to Rhea to Damian Priest to at times even Finn Balor, and watching Dominic and JD be the bump guys and learn, like having an opportunity. It's like Evolution style where they're getting to learn from some of the best. That whole group it's really awesome. And Damian Priest, his age, I feel it's just not even a factor there. The fact
no.
that he's got that Money in the Bank contract, the fact that he has never had that, no main event runs in him. Those are all fresh matches. Those are all brand new money making opportunities, and I feel he's proven that he can talk. He's proven that he can wrestle. He has delivered when he's had the pressure put on him. There's not too much you could ask for out of a guy in that position. He came up the right way. He was there the night I broke my leg. He was on the show.
That's right. I was there.
Like he's been through the whole system and done it just how you're supposed to do it. And anybody that has an appreciation for this has got to be rooting for him in a certain way, whether or not he's a bad guy on TV or not.
And certainly shout out to, obviously he came through the WWE Performance Center system in NXT, but also proper credit to Danny Cage and the Monster Factory and others and other promotions he came through also to really shape who he is. Yeah, I didn't expect to go here, but like aging in wrestling, does it matter anymore?
God, I hope not.
But look, hey, you know what? We're sitting here now. We're talking about Damian Priest, just 40 years
weird.
old. LA Knight's 40 years old. These are people in our generation in 2023 who are still receiving huge opportunities because they still look good. They can still do it. They might not necessarily have the mileage on their bodies that other guys who have maybe been in WWE longer may have because of the travel and because of the schedule. But it's pretty. I mean, even yourself seeing opportunities that you're getting at this stage of your career, however many years it is in, it's like there's still a hell of an earning window for a lot of guys.
There's never been a time in professional wrestling that has seen guys in their 40s and even early 50s in the athletic shape that they're in. It's their prime almost, as opposed to being in their late 20s, early 30s. And there's a lifestyle adaptation that I feel has happened across the board, where it's not we all know the stories of the wrestlers of the 70s and the 80s and how they ran and what they did when they weren't wrestling and even while they were wrestling. And even though the style is a little bit more at times high impact or high risk, guys are taking better care of their body now. We have a much better understanding of nutrition in 2023, 2024. We have some of the best nutrition or sports therapy where you can rehab injuries. I mean, Randy Orton rehabbed a spinal fusion and came back bigger and leaner than ever before. And he's 48 years old, right? I think he's 48.
I think he's 43 or
Something like
44. I think he's a little bit younger than me. I'm 44.
I don't know. I thought something the other day, maybe 46. But either way,
Yeah.
it's guys didn't do that 30 years ago. They didn't go away and come back from spinal fusion surgery in the best shape ever.
And that was usually
So
the end if you had some sort of fusion on your spine. You know,
absolutely,
like you
yep,
look
that
at
was the
even
end.
AEW now, it's like Edge is, I think, almost 50 or 50. He was 49, I
Yep,
think, when he came back to AEW. But, you know, he's had a triple fused spine. Like, and he's back and looking like he is and
yep.
performing at the level that he is too. It's just, it's honestly nice to see. I know people are, I think people need to readjust their clocks a little bit to, oh, this person's so old. Why are they doing this? Why are they still doing this? You know, because aging is different now. And across the board, people are working at different times of their lives. And, you know, it's just,
Yeah,
it's not, maybe 20 years ago, 35 might have been old. Like,
right. Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
it's just, there's at least probably 20 guys on the main roster of WWE in their 40s right now.
Yep.
And it's
Well,
just, yeah, go ahead.
the run for a guy, a professional wrestler too, is how many years do you get in that system and on top? Realistically, there's not a whole lot of 25-year careers, so you're 10 or less probably, if we're even talking through that system. So it's not like lifers anymore too. There's life after wrestling that a lot of guys are also preparing for, and some people didn't get into it until they were in their 30s. They started really late, which means there's still a lot of miles left on their body. Um, I started when I was 18 years old. So I've been doing it for 23 years, but straight. Like I didn't
Yeah.
take any time. Uh, and I had to like readjust my strategy on how I was going to take care of my body and see how I felt. And I feel right now, I feel just as good, actually even better than I felt when I was 30 years old. And that I never thought that I would say that or feel that way, but to the idea that I would have to stop wrestling right now because I was 40, like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't feel that at all. I don't think that I'm like, like overstayed my welcome. You know
No.
what I mean? Like, how some people
And
feel that way. I don't feel that at all. Like,
and you and those other veterans, you also have like you're smarter than you're probably working smarter than you were when you were in your 20s too, in terms of what you're
way,
doing in the ring too. So
way
it's like
smarter.
so maybe that's another reason that I'm just going to credit now in 23 and 24 for why wrestling is better, because we're actually using veteran wrestlers correctly. And before I go into AW, I'll say too, a piece of that NXT PC piece is that they're sending wrestlers from the main roster to NXT to wrestle those guys
Yeah.
that have zero experience. So guess what, guys? Guess how you get better in wrestling? You wrestle
Yeah.
people who are better than you.
Yeah, you can that can't be like overstated how much learning goes on in the ring. Hale and I wrestle at ISBW. Yeah, it's an independent promotion in New Jersey, and we've been working with talent that is younger, and you constantly realize how much is actually like on the job training and how much you're really doing that while you're in the ring in front of people. And you have to be able to wrestle guys that are better than you to learn. You have to. That's how the craft is passed from one person to the next. You can't read it in a book. You can't sit and listen to a seminar. It's one of those things that you actually have to do and absorb it in the moment and be in the experience. And that is guys who have been in those positions and been around for 20 years, working with guys that are brand new and having the veterans wanting to teach and having the younger guys wanting to learn. And if you're in a scenario where both of those things are going on, I've never been around it where it isn't a tremendous environment and everybody's improving by leaps and bounds. Where there's, there can still be ego involved. There'll always be ego involved in pro wrestling, but it's to make each other better. And if the end result is to make everybody a ton of money and be better at this whole thing, it's win-win.
Yeah. So moving on to AEW now, I wrote down a couple of things I like about them and maybe a couple of things that I don't like about them. Great pay-per-views, maybe the best in the industry, maybe the best in the industry ever, and just in terms of overall quality. Like if you really look at their whole catalog of shows, amazing numbers of crossover opportunities between promotions with them. They partner with just about anybody they can. Where it makes sense. Like I don't think it's partnerships that don't make sense when they enter into one, and just a wide variety of styles in that company too, where you don't always you're seeing different things all the time. For me, the negatives on their side for AEW are storytelling that's a little bit inconsistent and not. It's kind of annoying over time where you miss a key detail or something. And just for me too, in 2023, when the main company is PG, I feel like they cross the line of decency a little bit too often in AEW too. So what do you see about AEW? What do you like? What don't you like?
I agree with all of your points. That all of those things are definitely points that I've considered and thought about too. And the edginess of their product is, there's never been a wrestling company that has been considered edgy that didn't go too far and have to be pulled back.
All of them have at some point. Yeah.
All of them have. Yes. So there's always this finding where your line is, and that process usually isn't fun. And you just hope that they're listening and they've learned where their line is. And the troublesome thing is that the line's been established now, and hopefully, we've seen it be teased a few times where they're going to go back to that well, and it's like, let's just stay away from it. And like, it's hard to be edgy and not push the line. And that right now, the other company's doing PG, and you have to be different. So I get it.
Yeah, me too.
The thing I'd like to see is the television shows, the having a brand new company and there's buzz behind it. How could there be a wasted TV show? Like the Friday show when it was the Rampage, I think it's called. There's Collision, there's Rampage, and then Dynamite too, right? Dynamite's Wednesday, Rampage Friday, Collision Saturday. So the Rampage show, it was like when it first was announced, all this buzz behind an extra hour of TV on TNT, and then it became like missable. It wasn't like it was something to watch, and I couldn't find. You wouldn't see the advertisement for it, or you didn't know who was on it, or there was no like big buzz behind it. And AEW has the ability to create a buzz behind every show. They have such a wide depth of a talent pool to choose from that you could literally have matches that you've wanted to see your whole life on every show, and like they could build it however way they wanted to build it. But I would really love to see every television show they've to have them maximize the most of every hour they have on television right now. I've really enjoyed the influx of new, unheard of independent talent that's getting an opportunity on the show. Like Andretti has been awesome with his match against Jericho, where he got this opportunity, and they tell that story again where a guy gets the surprise win over the veteran, the 1-2-3 Kid Razor Ramon story. It's been cool to see him do his stuff, and seeing El Hijo del Vikingo and all of these really, like, they get a lot of flack for their their stuff necessarily not making sense, but their matches aren't about that. And if you remember watching, like for example, WCW Nitro, uh, the Luchador matches, they were. If you listen to Eric Bischoff talk about why he had those matches and why they put them on television, they're there for a reason, and it's not so that you could have the psychology match. It's so that when someone's flipping through the channels and they catch this dude doing this giant backflip over the top rope, they're like, "Whoa, what was that?" And it's for making the highlight reels of the shows and stuff. It all has multi purposes, and it's not to like, you don't. I don't know. I think I have more sense as a wrestling fan to know what that's for and why those guys are there, and to appreciate their athleticism and their talent. And got like Gravity too. I thought that that it was cool having that guy come out too.
That match that he had on the one episode of Collision, maybe we'll take that one against the House of Black out of the mix.
But the fact that there's just guys that are getting a chance to like get out there and make a name for themselves that wouldn't have ever gotten that opportunity. It reminds me very much of an opportunity guys got on Nitro and WCW back in the day.
You were one of the first people to tell me about Orange Cassidy. I mean, and Orange Cassidy's a huge star now. Like, and I know that you saw him in some of the early parts of his career.
Yep. A lot of people forget that he was in the Colony in Chikara. And he actually did one of our House of Hardcore spot shows where he was the Red Ant. And he was on the show. Awesome. I had never seen him live, and it was the first time I had met him. And when he was done, he got a bonus on the show because he was out of everybody there, just incredible. And to watch him go through the ranks and to become who he became and to become such a huge star, it's really cool. He's my nephew's favorite wrestler. So I actually have, it's after Christmas now, but he got an Orange Cassidy action figure for Christmas, and they have tickets to the December 27th Dynamite down in Florida, which is a couple days ago as you're listening to this. But, big fans in that respect. But the guys getting that are homegrown AEW stars too, I have an appreciation for that. MJF has worked his ass off to get where he is at. Fought through a lot of stuff. He had to stand up for himself. He had to go through a lot. Say what you want about him, but he's worked his butt off to get to that spot. So, and when you think of AEW, you think of MJF.
And like we did with WWE, do you have a breakout star for 2024 that you're thinking about?
I'm a secret Sammy Guevara fan, which is kind of probably a surprise, but I actually enjoy him quite a bit. I think his mixture of being quite braggadocious and athleticism, he's got a lot to bring to the table. Hopefully he gets just a little bit more size and a little bit more muscle maturity, but I see him as being somebody that can be somebody that they count on going forward.
One thing I'll say to wrap up AEW before we go into some of the other companies, which will probably be a little bit less of where we went into WWE and AEW, but I think the pacing of the AEW television show and their television tapings is a problem. I attended the Collision Ring of Honor tapings in Newark, and that was probably almost a 6-hour show. The bell time on the ticket was 6:30. It didn't end until about 12:07. By the time the show ended, 75% of the crowd was gone. Conversely to that, as I said, we're recording this on December 8th. I went to the MLW tapings last night in Long Island City, Queens. Smaller promotion, smaller venue, fewer people, better pacing, better choices for matches that are happening after the live broadcast ends that are keeping the audience in the building after the pay-per-view broadcast ends. So I think they need to pay attention to that. And it feeds back into your point about you need those destination matches on all of your shows to keep the interest. WWE does that also at the SmackDown tapings with their dark matches that happen after the tapings end. You know, they pick the right things that people are just going to stick around for. And you know, I don't know what the solution for that is for AEW, but they need to get there.
I think the solution is in the consistency. And there's been a lot of tumultuousness going on surrounding that company. And the best that they could possibly ask for is for all of that stuff to calm down and for them to be able to just focus on their storytelling and their wrestling. The Continental Classic is a fantastic tournament. It was everything that you would want out of a wrestling tournament for an American audience. The matches were easy to understand. The point system didn't get too out of control. I always thought that the G1 was too confusing, so it would never work here. And they eliminated what was really super confusing. And, you know, capitalizing on that was a perfect time to like start establishing some new stars, start establishing some new stories, and then get back to the business of having a great wrestling show. And anybody that's not interested in doing that right now for them should be an afterthought.
Yep. Let's move on to some of the other promotions. There's 3 that I see in the U.S., maybe a 4th, depending on how you go, that are kind of the other main players in the wrestling realm. We'll start with the NWA, which is somewhere that you have wrestled on Power and on USA. For me, what makes them stand out and moving forward into 24 is they may be getting some television exposure too. A different company, a different look, a different cadence, a different, different wrestlers that you're not seeing other places. And just also just a really experienced locker room that has more of like an old school kind of feel to it. What do you see about the pluses and minuses of the NWA as you turn the calendar to 24, knowing of course that you also have wrestled for this company too, so you have some firsthand knowledge.
The biggest quality for NWA that I have noticed as a watcher, like as an observer and as well as a performer in the company, is they have made a focus that you follow the rules and the referee isn't buried. So you have this framework now that you have to stick to when you wrestle your matches. You cannot tag without holding the tag rope. You cannot get in the ring and not get out of the ring in 5 seconds. You can't hold a chokehold for longer than 5 seconds. They will disqualify you, whether that was part of the plan or not. And I've enjoyed that aspect of the NWA because it allows me to start to like I can focus on the characters and not focus on necessarily like what the chicanery is going to be or what's happening here or how did he get in and like how did that didn't make sense and like how can that guy be legal when he didn't tag and how come both these guys can be in the ring and the referee's not throwing somebody out like
you're able to turn your brain off a little bit, like
just a little bit, just watch wrestling, and it's awesome. It's what I've always loved about it, and it's one of the things that we've loved about competing there is that framework allows you to stay within the confines of the rules, and then it shows you who the bad guys are because when they break the rules, it's very easy for you to understand why they're a bad guy. And NWA, I feel, is also done in that same regard a very good job at establishing who the heels are and who the baby faces are, who you should be cheering for and who you shouldn't on their programs. It's very, very simple and easy to understand. And then you get an access to guys that are up and coming and from areas that you wouldn't necessarily have seen get an opportunity yet at this level. A guy that stands out to me right now, Colby Carino, the NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion. And he won the title from Kerry Morton in the NWA at the last pay-per-view. I think it was in September, and has had up until this taping right now 14 or 15 title defenses. He looks good. He is putting his body to the limit in those matches, and he's taking an opportunity to stand out. That's awesome. I'm super happy for him and interested in following his career and where it goes from there. But there's a lot of guys that have had that story, and EC3 right now as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion looks the part, wrestles the part, talks the part. He looks like a world's champion. There is no doubt about it. And he backs it up when he's in the ring. So for whatever detraction people had for Tyrus being the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, EC3 makes up for that in spades. So they're poised right now to take the company to that next level. And it's all really Billy's vision and what he wants to do and how far he wants to take it. And he keeps everything very close to the vest. He doesn't let a lot of people in on what the future plans are. I know that next year the Smashing Pumpkins are touring with Green Day. That is a huge tour. This year, the NWA was part of the Smashing Pumpkins tour. I can't imagine that there'll be just a complete separation. So the NWA will be in front of lots of eyes, whether it's live wrestling, whether it's just highlight videos that get played at a concert. Who knows where it goes and what happens there, but their recent TV deal, clearly they've been put on the CW app. Whether or not that means live shows will go on CW as well, who knows? But I definitely feel that they've carved out a niche space for themselves, and it's finding the people that are looking for that kind of wrestling that really needs to be the next goal, I feel.
I appreciate the long game that they had. I think people were, when Billy Corgan first purchased the intellectual property of the NWA and started what his idea for relaunching it was, I think people wanted it on TV right now. But he, and he mentioned this in interviews he may have even mentioned the one with me, but just about kind of like being ready for when that moment came, to have the infrastructure in place, to have the production in place, to have the right team in place, to have the right team backstage in place, so that they, when they needed to, could just be like, yep, well, we have a TV ready product already. Here you go.
Yeah.
It's an impressive, because a lot of people will jump before they're ready. And he kind of, for whatever reason, I'm sure he was trying behind the scenes for a long time to get what he wanted, but I feel like they're ready for this moment now. And it's kind of cool to see just another player sort of get in the mix where it wasn't before. And more opportunities for the wrestlers, more opportunities for us, and to try to carve out time in our schedules to watch more professional wrestling, which is amazing.
Well, as much as the roster is big, the roster's small too. So they have the core group of guys that are their main stars, and then they rotate other people around them, giving people opportunity, as well as letting the main stars get some highlight matches in too. So it's really a throwback. And I was comparing their rosters with like Impact and Impact Wrestling, and how Impact seems like has such a big roster, but it's the same. It's a core group, and they bring in some people here and there to freshen things up, but the same core group is really who the stories have been built around for the last few years. So, and I think that that's important for the fans that have been sticking around all this time. They're invested in those people.
As we move on to Impact TNA, I'll be perfectly transparent in that I have not watched a ton of Impact in the last, I don't even know how long. I've swooped in on it. Like I've come in and I've gone out. I've been to shows. That's the thing. I consume it when I hear that there's something that I need to go check out. I go find it. They're that for me right now. And it's similar to where Ring of Honor was with me probably in about 2006 or 7. Like I heard a buzz about something and then I'd go find it. So it's interesting that they're leaning back into the TNA branding. I know some people think that that's not maybe the best idea for whatever, but they are. It's what they feel their identity is. But they, like to your point, though, they do have that core of guys. Like they have Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, and I'm trying to think of some of the other
Eddie
people.
Edwards.
Yeah,
And Frankie Kazarian is there, and in the
they have better
knockout.
momentum than they've had in a while. I feel like
Yeah,
it's strange, and I wouldn't have expected it necessarily, but it's there. Like I was at a show of theirs in Poughkeepsie when they did one of their pay-per-views last year, and the crowd for the pay-per-view was okay. The crowd for the tapings was not. And it was just like,
yeah.
all right, where is this company at? But they've really kind of created some matches and some moments since then that have kind of gotten them back in the conversation. So where do you kind of see them in 2023 as I accidentally bumped my microphone?
Well, it's weird because just a couple of weeks ago, it was almost the rumors were that CM Punk was considering to go there. Like they were
And they
actually like,
offered Will Ospreay reportedly a lot of money too.
right, right. So it's excuse me, it's not within the realm of possibility that they get some major stars, and that used to be like how TNA was, and I think that they're making a play now to be considered one of the big main companies again. And I feel that when they were purchased by Anthem, it was Anthem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they really took the time to like get small and find out what they were and what kind of company they were going to be and start to rebuild from there. Because when they bought it, it wasn't necessarily a profiting machine. So a profitable machine. So now they have a brand that could actually tour. They did some really smart things by spending some time in Canada. And their home base had really been Nashville and Florida. And in 2023, they spent a lot of time in Canada. They actually brought in some, local stars from Canada who hadn't had much exposure on the national scene yet. And there was an injury to Josh Alexander, which really forced a couple other people to step up. And, and just even Josh Alexander, his rise, and him being, somebody that the company could count on and that could be a world champion. And they have just like so many guys and so much talent there. And they don't, their television show, when I watch it, when I can find it, seems to fly by because it's not like they're cramming everybody into every episode. They are perfectly content with knowing they're going to get 10 guys on this one and then maybe another 10 the next week. And it may not even be the same people, but we can just show a video package of what happened or whatever. And, the shows, they don't feel like crammed and they're not hard to watch or hard to follow, but it is hard to find it. And I agree with that assessment that how I consume it's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I have found a channel that puts the show up either a day or two after, and I watch it then, usually on Fridays. But I've enjoyed the stuff that I've seen. It's been really cool to watch Alex Shelley and Steve Macklin and Chris Sabin and our good buddy Tommy Dreamer, the digital champion as of right now. But yeah, they are poised to take that product to a bigger level. They just need the marketable name to put on the posters and the flyers for touring. But they've done really well without having to do that. So
yeah, it's wild too, because I think one of the reasons that when I stopped watching TNA weekly, which would have been right before Aces and Eights, actually. So it's been a long time since I watched them weekly.
Yeah.
But like that was a part of the problem. It was the watchability of it. And like hearing now that like you could sit down and it flies by as a 2-hour program. That's the opposite of the TNA that I left. So that's good to know. Is there anybody over there that you see that you mentioned so far? You've mentioned Priest for WWE. You mentioned Carino for NWA. Who did you mention for AW? I'm trying to remember who your AW
Sammy
Guevara. Right.
Yep.
Who's your Impact person to watch in 24?
That was a good one, but his name just went out of my head. He used to be in one of the Rascals tag team, I believe. Wentz.
Zachary Wentz.
Yeah, I enjoy Wentz a lot. He just came back, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
do you remember, who's his partner?
His partner for this
Yeah,
was Wes Lee, who actually just got
who's
injured in NXT.
Yeah, and who's his partner now?
Trey Miguel, I think.
Yes, I like Trey Miguel as well. Both of them super talented, and they have come a long way from when they first started. On the world title front, Steve Macklin did a great job stepping up and being a world champion in that Josh Alexander injury, and actually seeing a real solid heel run out of him. He was very easy to hate. It was really good.
Moving to MLW, which, as I've mentioned, this is probably the last one we hit, other than kind of talking a little bit about the indies towards the end here. But it's December 8th. I was actually at their taping and their Fight Plus show December 7th at the Melrose Ballroom in Long Island City. To me, what stands out with MLW, they've been such an interesting company to watch. And then, of course, we have to mention, for full disclosure, that they are in the middle of a lawsuit with WWE regarding monopolistic, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's their smooth production. Like they do a good job of making things feel big, even if they might not be as big as as they are in the crowd. If that makes any sense, like their product looks smooth. And they do have a lot of good crossover stuff starting to happen right now too. I mean, I'm sitting there last night. I'm watching a Tokyo Joshi Pro Championship match in Queens. I'm watching Rocky Romero wrestle Mascara Dorada from CMLL in person. Like, how am I seeing this in Queens? Just like, so. When you look at MLW, what do you see?
I watched that match and I thought it was awesome. By the way.
I keep forgetting that it was broadcast because I was there.
Yeah, it was really good. I agree with you on the production, man. Like the one thing when I was watching that show yesterday, I thought, wow, that production is really on point. The production for MLW shows has always been really, really on point. Their settings for the arenas always look great. There's never a time that it doesn't look big league with the video monitors, the sleek turnbuckles, the ring aprons, the entranceways. It sometimes he's even like Fight Club-esque. I've really loved their presentation. I've been a fan of it ever since I've watched it. I've followed MLW since before when it was just an indie promotion, and then Court's resurgence from being in WWE to starting the podcasting world, and he's the one who introduced everybody to Conrad, and then he got back into running shows, and I have really always thought that Court Bauer is the best asset for MLW because, well, number one, it's his company, obviously, but he's following his vision for how he feels wrestling should be and presented, and he sticks to it, and he firmly believes in that vision. And if you're on board with it, then you're on his team. And if you're not on board with it, you're not on his team.
And he's a fan too. I mean, the conversations I've been able to have with him at times over the years, it's just like he came up through. I actually had to ask him flat out, like, look, I know who you are as a fan, but I have absolutely no idea how you got where you are. And he told me the whole Wild Samoans story and and all that stuff. So I just always kind of known of him through message boards and other things like that over the years, and just didn't know his whole deal. So it's interesting to get that kind of perspective. The other thing that's fascinating for me as I look at wrestling in 2024 is Paul Heyman's fingerprints are literally everywhere. because
Yeah.
WWE, you can't go through the main event right now in WWE without going through Paul Heyman because he's Roman Reigns' guy, he's Brock Lesnar's guy, he's CM Punk's guy, he was Ronda Rousey's guy. So basically, if you want to do anything there, you're going through him creatively anyway. AEW, you have Tony Khan, who went to ECW shows as a 12-year-old. NWA, you have Billy Corgan, who was an ECW fan who actually appeared on ECW television.
Yep.
MLW, you have Court Bauer, who grew up going to ECW shows and is very much part of that thinking. And then in Impact, you got Tommy Dreamer
And Bully Ray.
and Bully Ray. I mean, it's funny the way that ECW and that way of, and if you want to go further and further up the tree, you've got Dusty Rhodes, you've got Eddie Graham, you've got Bill Watts, and like you've got all sorts of fun little branches of what's making this a really interesting time for pro wrestling.
Well, think about what the thing that made ECW this counterculture phenomenon was the ability by Paul Heyman to create an enemy. And the enemy in the WWE, an enemy that he was being paid by.
That's even the best part.
Yeah. And the problem is that nobody in wrestling can create that enemy anymore. And they're all trying desperately to be this rebellious, I don't say they're all, it's a very general statement, but
I know what you mean.
There is a tendency to be this rebellious counterculture wrestling, when the thing that made Paul Heyman and ECW so great was that they were outside the box thinkers, and they were doing things differently than what had been done ever before. And to truly, truly, truly stand out and be the money-making counterculture phenomenon, you're going to have to do something that nobody's ever done before, and you're going to have to do it differently than anybody's ever done it before, and you're going to have your unique stamp of approval on it. And everyone hopefully can take what they have learned from what Paul Heyman's taught and shown and done, and put his because his fingers are in every part of the professional wrestling business, and look at how they can take that and be wildly different and stand out and be wildly creative and be the next thing that everybody else is trying to be for the next 25 years. Because that in and of itself, and it takes catching lightning in a bottle for sure. It's much easier said than done. It's having the right vision, the right leader, the right locker room, the right exposure, and the right time in society. But a lot of those things are present right now.
Yep.
And it's whoever's going to be the ones that have that ability to live in the now and realize that it's the opportunity right here to take that big leap and be the thing that stands out. Because everybody thought, AEW was going to be the far and away number 2. And what we're seeing is that the field has leveled a bit. The playing field's a bit more even. And it doesn't always, the spoils always go to the person who's got all of the money, the person that has paid for the best locker room and for all that stuff. And it's oftentimes, Paul Heyman showed you that it's the ones with the heart that can do it, and the ones that believe in themselves and believe in the vision of making the next greatest thing. So I'm not so sure that the number 2 in pro wrestling by the time we have this conversation next year is exactly the same.
That's really interesting. And it's also, by the way, I had no idea I was doing a double episode today, but we totally did. But I would say too that it's all the other alternatives have relatively deep pockets. So it's like nobody's really in danger of like, oh my God, how am I going to make payroll this week? How am I keeping the lights on this week? It's creativity. It's the ways of distributing your product. And I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, almost the exact same thing you just said, that instead of focusing on number one, AEW should focus on staying number two because they have company at 3, 4, and 5. And if you want to go deeper too, we can. But like New
Yep.
Japan is still doing some things, and globally,
Oh, yeah.
GCW is still drawing crowds. Like it's like this is not a downtime for pro wrestling. On that note, let's talk a little bit about the independent scene because it's what you are also a part of,
Yep.
in addition to the other work that you're doing. What are you kind of seeing trends wise that are out there in the indie world right now? What kind of indie stuff is standing out to you?
Well, the indies in the second half of this year kind of took a hit and have been a lot slower than they were at the beginning of the year. Uh, as far as like bigger shows where you're selling out high school gyms and whatnot, the smaller shows like armories and church halls and things like that are doing pretty well. And I feel they've always done pretty well. The 250, 300 to 500 people, those indie shows, as long as they're promoted well in the area that they're running the show, traditionally do well. It's when you're trying to draw 1,000 to 2,000 where the names right now aren't available for those
Right.
shows. And AEW changing their taping schedule to having a show on Saturday has really hurt the indies because a lot of the guys that were able to still work indies under AEW deals can't not be at television.
And if you're an
Uh,
indie guy that's wrestling on AEW or Ring of Honor, if they're in your
right,
region, you're going there because you want to have FaceTime.
right. So it's tough right now for the Saturday shows, Saturday independent shows, to really get a lot of legs. The Legends of the 80s, Legends of the 90s stuff seems to be doing pretty well. And when there's a show attached to it, the show does well. Fans stick around from the convention to the show. If they do it the right way, it seems to do okay. But there's only a couple of really like unsigned indie stars right now that are the hot commodity. So the best advice I could ever give at the point of we're at right now is to, as an indie wrestler, spend as much amount of time getting over as you possibly can. Have as many people at the end of that show talking about you and remembering you as you can. And
I,
it's social media followers, it's creating a buzz in the building, it's having people talk about you, it's having people saying that they want to come buy tickets to see you wrestle. It's about going on your merch store and buying something here or there, and it's a groundswell of support, and that is how you're going to get to the next level right now, is standing out in this environment, because it's a prime environment to stand out.
and I'll say that one of the more enjoyable matches that I saw in person in 2023 was a part of one of those Legends conventions, the 80s Wrestling Con in Morristown, New Jersey, which was yourself and Hill Collins, the Now, taking on the Powers of Pain and the Headbangers. And you would think of a match like that, and you wouldn't think like, oh, that's going to be so much fun. But it was like you guys double suplexing the Barbarian, for crying out loud. The Barbarian in 2023.
It was awesome, very awesome. Yeah, man, like those shows seem to do really well. The fact that the Barbarian and the Warlord still want to get in there and actually wrestle and mix it up a little bit. The fact that the Headbangers are like,
They're still good.
we're gonna have another match with the Headbangers in 2024. Like they're pushing for it, so it's gonna happen. I just don't know where, but we're gonna have it happen, and it's awesome. Like I never imagined as a kid that I was gonna wrestle the Headbangers when I was in this business, especially after being in it for over 20 years.
Where you guys are the young pups in the match.
Yeah, we were the young kids. The show that this Northeast Wrestling did at the Mid Hudson Civic Center in late April was the last real big indie show that was promoted that way, with talent that's on television, as far as like in this area.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how we go from here in 2024 with indie shows. if you're a local independent wrestling company that has been doing really well, and there's no bigger one to come in and take your shine, if you're establishing local people and they're starting to get a following, maybe some smaller companies will start to rise up this year. We'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting
NWA's
to
got
see.
a territory system now, so
I was going to bring
you
that
know,
up too. I mean, that's an interesting way, because the one thing about, we're talking about 40-year-olds still wrestling, 50-year-olds still wrestling, 60-year-olds still wrestling, but
yeah,
the way that you always build for wrestling is have the eye on the future. And WWE's got that with NXT. NWA's got it with rebuilding the territory system with the Exodus Pro, and then the Joe Kazana one that they just recently announced with NWA. They've all got some sort of idea of where the pipelines are. And honestly, as odd as it sounds, AEW, as contracts expire, is sort of going to end up becoming sort of a pipeline to WWE anyway, because there's no way you can sign all of those people. It's just physically impossible. So they're going to get people like they did with Jade Cargill and Cody and Punk and stuff like that. It's just we might be back into the Monday Night Wars era, sort of jumping back and forth. Oh my God, this person showed up here. Oh my God, this person showed up here. And I think that's okay too, because that actually was really fun when it was happening. So,
yes.
with that, I think we're going to wrap this up now, Vic. I love doing this. Like, let's do this more often. This was just us, just chit chatting
Can't
about
believe an hour.
everything.
That was awesome.
It flew by when I looked at the clock when we hadn't even talked about like MLW or NWA yet, and we were as far as we are. I knew that we were having a pretty good conversation. So,
This is great.
thank you so much, and let's put this on the calendar. Maybe we'll do a mid-year one. Let's hit the midway point in June, and everybody follow Vic and his tag team partner Hale Collins on social media. Check out what they're doing. Big things in the NWA when they're there. ISPW, Northeast Wrestling, is where I caught them in the last year. Veterans that know how to get it done, like still young veterans of the mat game.
Phil Strom stamp of approval, man. I appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too, Phil.